Hello, parents, grandparents, future parents, and curious minds. Welcome to the podcast. I'm Steven.
And I'm PJ.
And this is
Dad's Discuss.
How's it going, PJ?
Dude, it has been a while. I'm glad to be back.
Months, some would say months.
It has. And I'd like to give a shout out to Steven, who has recently graduated from his post-secondary education. That was one of the main holdups for us being able to record again for you guys.
Yeah, cheers to that. That and, just the chaos that spring brings and a new year and everything. There we go.
Speaking of cheers. Today, both me and Steven are drinking a black lager from Yellowhammer Brewing here in Huntsville, Alabama.
Luckily, they even put the hops to malts ratio on the side of the can, it looks like. So that helps me know that I'm going to enjoy it because the hops is very minimal.
I do like when they do that. Same thing with whiskey and bourbons. I had one the other day where they had the mash bill listed out. And I thought that was really nice. You can just see like what percentage of rye and corn go into that particular bourbon.
So what were you enjoying?
It was a Willow Tree single barrel.
Oh, okay.
Yep.
I think I've seen their label floating around, but I don't know if I've had any of that yet.
It was having a discount, which is part of the reason why I got it. It was roughly half off from its normal shelf price.
Well, there you go. Well, for everybody listening, we decided to just not pick a topic this week. We were just gonna, freehand it, whatever you would call it, and talk about things that's been going on since the start of the year and catch up on the world and everything that's been happening. So,
Absolutely.
What's been going on, PJ?
Well, as anyone who is a parent or is considering being a parent, I know we mentioned this before, but just seeing the growth in your kids, even over a short time span, like. My youngest daughter just finished or graduated, if you will, pre-K.
Oh, yeah.
And will be moving on into kindergarten. But watching her understanding of the world and knowledge gain, she can pick out letters now. She can do simple counting. And even a year ago, that just didn't exist. So watching them soak up information and then being able to retain it, to me, has been pretty fascinating.
Yeah, and just being able to spell their name out on
right,
with
exactly.
a pen and paper and read and stuff like that. Yeah, our oldest, leaving pre-K as well, is, actually attempting to read, even though she couldn't be bothered by it some days. But other days, she's really fascinated. You'll just see her in the corner attempting to read a book, and it's awesome.
That's exciting.
So everything's gaining.
Oh, yes.
Gaining momentum. Then the middle child's fiery as all get out, and the baby's finally through the worst of it, I think. He's still got, lung issues and is behind there, but we're catching up and feeling good, and everything's coming to an end for the spring, and graduation brings new time and new recordings and editing and
massive heat waves. I think we got up into the 90s for the first time this week, man. Summertime is a new type of fun. You get pool days now and all of that.
Yep, pool's opening next week, kids out of school next week. Kid turning 5 next week. A lot of new things.
Good. Well, I'm glad everything's been going well, and we're glad to be back here and recording. Hope you guys didn't mind the little hiatus, but as you know, that's just part of being a parent. Life comes at you, and sometimes things you have on schedule have to be adjusted.
Yep, and it gave us plenty of times to think about stuff, so there's probably going to be a new plethora of topics to cover and things that have been happening to us that we probably can't fit in one episode. So.
Absolutely.
Including all the, current world events that have gone haywire in the past. Gosh, it's been 4 months roughly since we talked, and it seems like a decade's worth of stuff has happened since then.
Absolutely, and the speed of information nowadays, even us, yes, we remember a time before the internet, but it was still an integral part of us in our adolescent years.
True.
And just the amount of information, say even 50 years ago, something happens in Washington, D.C. or across the globe, you may not hear about it immediately unless you have access to a television. And now you hear about it same day.
Yeah, just instant, as long as you're plugged in. I found with, doing school and stuff, if I wasn't plugged in for 3 weeks at a time, I was like, what happened?
And that
something was going on. Somebody got tariffed. Oh my God.
And if you could hear that noise, we're not going to edit it out. I had to look behind me. Stephen may have some type of ghost in his house because something just moved on this bookcase.
Yeah, a book fell over from sitting up straight. Not even sure how that happened. Probably like you said, a ghost is trying to communicate with you.
Yeah. Well, what book was it? Did you notice?
It's that one by the painting. That guy, whatever that is.
The Wisdom of the Saints. Oh,
Oh,
nice.
trying to speak to you.
I
That's
believe
another
so.
thing that happened since we've been gone. We got a new pope.
We sure
And
did,
I know
yes.
nothing about them other than that they came from what, Chicago or something?
Yeah, so I don't like the fact you've seen a lot of headlines that says the first American pope. The first United States pope. We've
Yeah.
already had a pope from the Americas.
Yeah.
But yeah,
It's
so
like
far,
America didn't exist before 1776.
exactly. We have, I'd say that's only been the past 2 weeks, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, something like that.
Yeah, dating our recording here.
Yeah.
But yeah, so far I like what I see from this guy. He seems very down to earth, seems very grounded.
That's good.
Yeah, everything that happened throughout the conclave process was fascinating to me because I was still not too much paying attention when it occurred last time, but I got to read a lot more about it and see the process.
Nice.
Yeah, we'll see how this one goes.
It was right during finals week for me, so I was like, they'll figure it out.
Right?
I'm not too worried about it. But they did. It was pretty fast, wasn't it? I don't know if it was
it was
historic fast, but
I don't think it was historically fast, but I do know that he was chosen in, a 2-day time frame from the Cardinals, and that is pretty quick.
that's pretty great. They must have already had him in mind or something.
I think so, yeah.
I feel like Francis was like crazy long period or something.
Yeah,
Either him or Benedict. One of the ones in our lifetime was like we were without a pope for what felt like a eternity almost.
We'll have to. I don't want to speak incorrect information. We'll have to look that up afterwards and talk in the next podcast to see what that time frame was. But I do remember it being a lot lengthier, multiple days of the white smoke, as they say.
Yeah, it's always a crazy time. I did like Francis. He was pretty chill dude too. So we'll see how Leo does.
Yes,
right?
he's also on the younger side of popes we've had recently. He's only 69, which, at our current age may seem like, a lifetime away.
Yeah.
But that's relatively young and younger than the past 2 presidents of the United States we've had.
That's fair. Well, yeah, the Pope usually ends up being of the older generation at the time, right? Because they've had time to be known in the church, right? Rather than like a 30-year-old priest or rising to cardinal isn't going to have a lot of time to hedge his bets and make his name known. But.
Exactly, and I think it's more similar to how companies are run. You don't put someone who's straight out of school into the CEO position. They have to have decades of experience working within the organization, gaining knowledge, continuing compassion and everything else that you're asked to do. But so it just tends to be an older person chosen because they have that experience, if you will, for the position.
Yeah. Makes sense. You do have younger CEOs though, but that's only because people, start their own business, right? So they're running it themselves from the ground up.
This is true. I wouldn't say that is typical though of companies that have been around for longer periods of time.
Yeah. Yeah, you gotta have a proven track record. I'll get firsthand experience in both of our companies probably how it's longer you're with the company, the more likely you are to run it, sort of thing. Unless if they need to bring in an outsider because nobody steps up or whatever.
This is true. Which they're not going to do in case of choosing a new pope, are they?
No. Yeah, no. That was funny. I was making the comment, I'm still in the running for pope after the first white smoke. But I think you probably have to be unmarried too, right? Or I thought it was always just, over 35 male or something like that.
I didn't actually look into that part because as far as I know, they've always chosen a cardinal.
Yeah.
Yes.
But I think it's open to all Catholics. I don't know. We'd have to do some research on that.
We would have to.
I'm just speaking out, as this podcast always is, just speaking out of my left side brain or right side brain, whatever it is.
Sometimes I just talk through my nose because I'm Italian.
Well, it's big now.
Oh.
God.
No, it's interesting you brought up that topic because in a previous podcast we had talked about education, and I know for your oldest, she is currently going to be going to
Catholic school.
a
Yeah.
Catholic school, and at the time I had said that public school is where I felt comfortable, and that's how me and you grew up with. But
Yeah.
that's now kind of evolved to the point that we are considering sending Luna to Catholic school if the public schools that we have on our list aren't able to work out due to like enrollment and things like that. So before, I would say no, that wasn't something that was currently on my radar, and now it's kind of switched. So always keep an open mind when you're a parent. Things
Yeah.
can change.
Well, you gotta be flexible with the kid too, right? Because you can find your kid doesn't adapt well to the Catholic school too, and you gotta find some other option, right?
This is true.
So
Yes.
it's a wild world out there. So I think some of the public schools in our area would be stellar. Others, it's like probably avoid them sort of thing. But I also think that probably wouldn't matter for our oldest in the end, other than the fact that she has to be pushed. So I think Catholic school's the best for her there because she's got a smaller class size and everything. So
That
she's
smaller
not
class
gonna get
size,
lost.
yeah, that can be so huge, especially you look back and then No Child Left Behind, and unfortunately I think that was kind of like a net negative, if you will, while so many resources and teachers' time was spent trying to help those who were struggling, that it left those who were already at that point not being engaged enough, and they kind of like fell off and just didn't see the benefit of
Yeah.
it anymore. So having the smaller class size where teachers can hopefully focus more individualistically to the student,
Yeah.
I really like that aspect.
Yeah, I think you get stronger education the less kids that are there to distract you, right? But then, you lose some of the social aspect, but you can, even in homeschool, you gotta put in the work to take them to social events and things like that, whereas they get it naturally from school.
This is
It's
true.
all a waiting balance,
It
right?
is.
Like, it's mind blowing how many options you have as a parent, and then you get one chance to make the right choice. But then I
Right?
guess you can always change, but changing then gives costs and things
And then
like
a
that.
new set of things to think about. Yeah,
Yeah,
but you're right. It's kind of funny how in the adulting world, so much of everything is just kind of thrust at you, and you're expected to, not necessarily deal with it, but hey, this is what you got to do. And it's like, well, I need a little bit of time to research. Like, there's a lot of different choices that could happen, and these choices can be very big life decisions.
yeah,
But you're expected to just sometimes you just have to make that
yeah,
decision. And you're like, well, may not be ready.
yeah. For lack of a better term, you gotta pull the trigger at some point, right?
Yes.
Yeah. And then you may want to go hard at public school, but then you may find that you want to move to fit the right public school, right? And then that comes with all sorts of problems. But yeah,
It,
it's a
that's
mess.
that it reminds me of something I learned one time at a previous employer that I thought was funny because I knew it applied to me. They classified people into 4 classes. I don't remember all 4 of the classes, but the one who they considered the CEO would be more like a lion, someone that they said does things in the order of ready, aim, ready, fire, aim. Like
Yeah,
they're ready to pull the trigger immediately, while engineers, such as myself, are more like the turtle, and they would equate that to being someone who would be like ready, aim, aim, adjust the sightings, aim some more, like
yeah,
thinking maybe a little bit too much before deciding to make that ultimate commitment.
yeah. I think we took the same train. Was that Eagle Leadership?
It probably
Yeah.
was.
Yeah, the lion, the monkey, the turtle, and the camel.
Oh, so there was a monkey and a camel in there. Got it.
Yeah, I was mostly turtle with some monkey in me. I feel like it all depends on where you take the test, like in a work environment versus home, right? I'm probably more of a lion at home than I am at work. But yeah, that's a good one. It's very relatable because you can think they tied a lot of the personalities towards an animal, which in nature has certain instincts, so that's easy to relate the personality types, in my opinion.
Yeah, because maybe I can't remember camel because in nature. I don't really know much about camels, so I probably didn't have anything to relate it to.
Yeah, the camel was a hoarder of knowledge sort of thing. So they are very meticulous and very fact based, and will get something, hone in on the details of something. Sort of like, the camel gathering the water on their back to last a long time. They gather knowledge.
Okay, all
So you're
right.
sitting there like, you have a lot of engineers that fall under camel too, because they're just like the deep technical people that all they care about is that niche subject that they know about,
That makes
and
sense.
they'll correct you. Think grammar Nazi.
Oh,
A grammar
yes.
Nazi would probably be considered a camel person.
Okay, all right.
But yeah, when they were doing the training for us, the thing that stuck out to me for turtle, since I was one, is that they typically sit there and don't talk. But when they do talk, you want to listen to them, because, like you said, they're running everything through their head and second guessing and scenarios and things like that, trying to figure out the right answer while everybody in the group's talking. So when they're silent for long enough, you turn to them and go, "Hey, what's your opinion?"
Yeah, like you've been thinking this through.
Yeah.
That's funny because we mentioned about that sometimes I do like to sit and I want to like weigh the different options, but I also know, and Kimber will tell you this, I do have a tendency to just spout off something that I think may be right, even though I have no former knowledge of the subject. And I'm running into this story. We went to Florida in an area that's very well known for sea spongers, and we're at the beach and something washes up. And someone picks it up and they're like, "What is this?" And instinctive, I was just like, "Oh, that's a sea sponge." It was not a sea sponge. Like,
You
why did I
didn't
say
you didn't even look at it. You didn't even look.
that? Right?
Yeah, that's a sea sponge. Dad, it looks like a fish.
Oh, that's got eyes. Hang on there.
That's pretty good. Speaking of the beach, one of my coworkers took a picture of a jellyfish on the beach, and it was just like, looked like a plastic bag sitting there on so vibrant and blue, like
It
a
is.
Ziploc.
And that's another thing that summer is about to bring us is, the opportunity for people to go on vacations, which, we could probably have an entire topic on that.
Yeah.
We might want to add that to the whiteboard. But now that everyone's about to be out of school, how often do you go on vacation with your family? Is that even an option, due to
Yeah.
everything's prices nowadays?
How do you budget? What do you budget for? Things like that.
Exactly. Airbnb versus hotel, everything of that.
Yeah, we were just thinking about that. That's another thing that happened since we were gone, is my wife went to be a stay-at-home mom, and so we're going down to yeah, news breaks, right?
Yeah, I just
So-
mouthed to Steven that I didn't know that. So there you go.
So down to one income means lots of different budgets for travel. Most of the time with our two incomes, we were like, well, we can travel and make it. We'll just like not spend money when we get back from the trip, because then our incomes will take care of it. Now we have to actually budget for travel, so that's going to be a fun. But then we were also wondering, when we were both working before she decided to quit, it was like, how the heck? I'm realizing how our generation was probably stressed about, like, the generations coming into where you need two incomes, how stressed that we are about summer and just the time our kids are off, because we were just bleeding vacation when my wife had to go to return to office, and she couldn't telework and have flexibility to work in the evenings anymore. And it was just like crazy how much leave we were losing.
Yep, and not only the leave, but just like the base necessities with everything. Prices have skyrocketed, and tariffs are definitely a part of that. But I would say that it is not impossible, but near impossible to survive on a single income unless you have a pretty good job. And when I actually met Kimber, she had two jobs, and I know that's actually probably more common than it was,
Especially for
even
single
like 10 or
parents.
20 years ago. Most people are working two jobs, so they themselves have a dual stream of income.
Yeah, the factory job right out of high school that could pay for a whole family's long dead and gone.
Right.
Right?
There's that meme floating around that, someone had a wife, two kids, and owned their own house as a mailman. That's just not going to happen in today's society.
Yeah, you gotta have worked all the right angles to get to be a single income, but I think it'll work out. It'll work out fine for us. I still got growth in my career, and she's only wanting to take a hiatus for until all the kids are at Holy Spirit because we can't afford private school on one income. So
I understand.
she'll either that or she'll just take them all out and homeschool them if she loves staying at home. But we'll see.
And that was part of our reasoning in considering sending our youngest to Catholic school, is after we figured how much we were paying monthly for daycare. It's not that much more to go ahead and just continue on with that. It's ridiculous what daycare prices are nowadays.
Especially if you can have some sort of plan for the summer, because actually the private school's cheaper than the daycare, but you don't get the 2.5, 3 months in the summer. So
Right.
it's like, it was, then you got to spend money figuring out or leave or some incredible amount of leave, I guess, if people get that. Or grandparents or something like that, or camps, and I don't know. We don't have to think about it anymore because she's not
Right.
she's not gonna be working. But
yeah, but for those of you who do, I would say our generation definitely had a uniqueness that the older generations did not have. It was very common to have a single stream of income, so you already had a parent there who would be able to be there for the children when they were not in school. And nowadays, where most families have, both parents working, what do you do in the summer? Do you go to VBS? That may only be a week or two. Do you have summer camps? There's a lot of things to think about, and it really just boils down to who's going to help me take care of these kids.
Yeah. Leans on building a support structure. So make sure if you're planning to have kids, start working on that support structure, right? Find some other parents that have same age kids. Make sure you have sane parents so grandparents can take a day or two. Like one of my other coworkers, she calls her house Camp Mimi because she hosts all of the grandkids.
All of them, okay.
For like 1 week of the summer. That's her camp. And so we were thinking about doing something similar with my in-laws. But, obviously we don't have to worry about it anymore. But those are just some ideas we were coming up with. And then they do have camps in Huntsville all over the place. For some of them are like 4 hours in the day, which doesn't help a ton. But it helps a little bit. And the other ones are all day. But they're more expensive than daycare. So it's insane.
Yep. Do you think that is a contributing factor to why a large portion of people in our generation chose not to have children? I think it's statistically we have less children nowadays than like our parents' generation did.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of systemic things that I think plays into that, but that's a pretty big multifaceted question. But I think part of it is, or a large chunk of it is financial. Just, that, and the other big thing for me is that, like, we had a huge wave of, like, teenage pregnancy being, like, just, extremely frowned upon and things like that, which makes sense, but, like, in that period when you are a teenager sort of thing, like with it being so incredibly set to the negative, I think it put a little bit of a spin in our minds of like just being a parent is a negative thing.
Yeah.
And so I don't know, those are the two things I think of when I think of how our generation came up and our views early on as parents. But then the other thing was, I mean, most of the engineers we went to school with, it was like, I want to get my career established and get some money and a nest egg set up, and then I'll have kids. Whereas generations before us was like, I want to have kids, and then I'll figure it out, sort of thing.
And I think even then saying, most of us as engineers, I still don't think that may have not been the norm.
Yeah.
Like having that mindset. Coming straight out of your, primary education.
Right. Yeah, you want to make your degree worth it, so a lot of people probably don't want to have kids establishing chaos.
Establishing chaos, I like that.
Yeah, you can go pretty deep on that topic.
Yeah, we might have to write that one on the board. I'm just kind of spitballing here throughout this session.
I mean, the big argument right now that is getting a lot of noise that I saw was, birth rates declining, and it's definitely a concern. But like, if you think of the grand scheme of things, a fluctuation of population is not necessarily a bad thing, especially with, AI and things like that, and robots taking over the world. If that is the case, then
Right.
maybe
No,
you don't need as much of a population.
I couldn't agree more, and I think a lot of these sayings that are like, well, former generations had multiple kids. Well, yeah, because they were using their kids as farm hands, like you were
Yeah,
working the field. Now, a single combine harvester can do the work of 100 humans.
right,
So it's not as necessary to have kids in today's society as it would have been, a few
right.
centuries ago.
There's no societal call for multiple kids to, make the next generation survive or the older
Exactly.
generation survive other than Social Security.
Yes, which at this point I just don't believe will be there. I think we've already talked about that
Right.
one.
I mean, you still want to at least close to replacement population, right? Because you want someone there to be able to almost take care of 1-to-1 on both ends of the spectrum. But like you said, you don't have the need to survive for farm things, and you don't have the need to attempt multiple kids because they all die in labor and things like
Hmm.
that anymore.
Yes. And as far as I know, at least here in this country, we haven't hit that point yet. Like, we still have a net positive of births compared to deaths, or am I incorrect in that?
I'd have to go look it up to say 100% accurate, but I thought I saw something that we've hit below the replacement level.
Okay. So we actually
So,
are having more people die yearly than we are having births.
right.
Okay.
But I mean, you gotta look at the boomers were during wartime, so it was like lots of people were having kids to
They were.
make sure the nation survived because that was the national call to,
Yes.
keep us running. And then just globally, people were in the whole systemic problem of saying, we're overpopulating the earth and our resources are going to run out. And just that scare is going to naturally plant a seed in people's mind that I should probably only have one kid because I don't want to destroy the earth.
Yeah, or you had countries that actually, initiated those policies,
Yeah.
China being the main one that comes to mind.
Yeah. I know I've run into a few internet conversations with people that were like, yeah, if you have a kid, you're destroying the earth basically because we don't need to be making more humans to cause global warming or climate change that's going to, destroy the atmosphere and make us all suffer. And I'm
Which,
like, well, I guess you have a nugget of truth
yeah,
there,
I think
but like,
you can have a spectrum of any opinion, and I'd say that one's probably more on the far end of the spectrum.
yeah, for sure. I was like, there's a nugget of truth in there that technically, if you were just looking at mathematical numbers, if we were like all having 10 kids, it probably would be a problem. But
Yes.
like having one kid isn't necessarily gonna kill the earth.
It's funny you brought up, too, about there was a higher prevalence of younger pregnancies when we were in that age. And I've read a study recently that's actually reversed, that you don't have a lot of teen pregnancies in the Gen Z generation compared to what previous generations saw.
Well, there's the problem.
Which doesn't necessarily mean there's been a decline in sexual activity amongst them. Just maybe they're, I don't know, not.
Well, more socially awkward males, right? Or you can go back to that systemic problem that, the Andrew Tates of the world and the alpha male people
Oh my
in
gosh,
quotation
yes.
marks, if you can't see that, will argue, that, I guess for lack of a better term, men are getting stifled in their purpose in life, sort of thing. And because women entered the workforce and now there's all this equality and stuff, so men don't get to be the protectors and breadwinners and things like that.
Luckily, I feel like that's a minute voice in the internet. I haven't met personally anyone who has that type of mindset, so hopefully that's not super prevalent. Maybe the media pushes that a little bit more than it actually is, just to kind of like have a fear tactic almost.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, you see it in some people, but not too much in the forefront. At least not the circles we probably run in.
Yeah,
You
maybe
probably see
so.
it more in like the rural side of things and whatnot.
That's an
People,
interesting dynamic. Like I said, we're bringing up stuff that we could have whole topics about, but just
that's perfect. We can go listen to this
Right.
episode back.
The rural word you mentioned, I really feel like gone are the days, at least in American politics, where someone has to consider themselves like liberal or conservative based on like the teachings of the platform. I just feel like there is a huge shift, and it's going to come to the point where it's almost entirely based off of whether or not you live in an urban area or live in a rural area.
Yeah, well, you're describing essentially the shift that Bernie Sanders runs on, right? Is class warfare.
And
That
it is, yes.
we're moving into a final phase of capitalism where it's the haves versus the have-nots
Yep,
sort
and
of thing.
I think Britain went through a similar aspect when you had those who used to wear the top hats and the canes as children, and those who literally had, "Can I have another soup, sir?"
Yeah.
And so we'll see what happens in the next couple decades, but I can easily see that being the case.
Yeah, it's kind of one of those things, those of us in the middle ground of, how well we handle it and manage the ourselves maybe, because that's where most people lie right now, right? Well, maybe not.
You
I
hope
guess there's
so,
a
but
good
I feel like the
yeah.
middle class is shrinking, and
Yeah, that's
unfortunately,
true.
a majority of those who were middle class, they're not going up, they're going down.
Yeah, that's true. And well, a few are rising to the top with Bitcoin right now,
Maybe.
if they sold.
GameStop to the moon.
Yeah. But yeah, money flows a lot easier in the global society now, so it changes hands on the daily, so people can get stolen their money from them, or they can rise to the top pretty quickly if they know what they're doing. It's pretty rough out there.
It is. It is. Everything has just increased, near exponentially. It's rather frightening to see, as you mentioned. It makes you wonder, like, how did people do this if they just had a single income stream? And it makes me wonder, like, I just feel so sorry for those who don't have, a higher paying job that we've been blessed to have.
Yeah.
It is impossible to support yourself and a family if you're only making minimum
Yeah,
wage.
at least near impossible. I mean, I've run scenarios on like, what if what if we started a business and we had no money and stuff like that? The book that our co-founder wrote, things where his story was, I got kicked out of a job because they sold, and I took the compensation package from that and started a company, and we lived off of like $20K a year or something like that for several years to try and get Torch Technologies to be a thing. And I was like, could I do that? Like, I don't know.
Yeah, that takes some serious determination.
Yeah, and these days and age, it's like you'd probably have to make at least $50K to, well, depending on cost of living area and things like that. But
I would say probably the biggest aspect of that is where you're going to live. Like,
yeah,
majority of apartments nowadays are more than some people's mortgages are.
Yeah.
And I just don't see 20,000, which would be less than the current poverty line.
Yeah, 20,000 would be, you're getting assistance from
yes,
nonprofits and things like that. But I think 50K you could establish a foothold at least.
I believe, yeah, that sounds right to me.
That would be the minimal comfort level, in my opinion, if you ran the numbers.
And sadly, that is probably slightly above the median income for the majority of this country. I want to say it's around 45 or 48.
Yeah, it's 40 something.
Yeah.
So that would definitely be a struggle for sure. Kat's trying to exit the room.
I just watched her open the door by herself, which is interesting to me. Another thing that has happened since we both met is I was always, I wouldn't say anti-pet, but we never had any of the typical pets like a cat or a dog. We'd occasionally have like a turtle or something. Well, we recently did adopt a cat, so now we have a cat in our house.
Nice. Name, age, weight?
Oh, gosh. She goes by many different names, but as Kimber said, she has no mistress and no master.
Yeah, it was kind of interesting for me joining the adulting world, getting my first cat, because we always had outdoor animals growing up because parents didn't really like them being indoor, and still have I guess my first cat. That was an indoor animal and worked out pretty well, I guess. At least I waited until I bought a house for that. And hopefully that burp didn't make it in the mic, but I'll edit it out if it did.
Or if it's funny enough, we'll leave it in just for you.
um, but yeah, animals are a commitment. You definitely can't have those with the last topic we were talking about with living on a barely skin and the bone budget income.
And that's interesting too. You know, they made fun of that for sure in like the famous movie Christmas Vacation, where the guy claims to not have money to buy gifts for his family, but he goes to the store and he's buying like 50-pound bags of dog food.
Yeah.
So I'd be interesting to look that up. Like, what are the statistics of pet ownership today versus, you know, past generations? And are those people who are foregoing children replacing that potentially with having a pet? Or, you know, are they just saying, to hell with all of it? You know?
Yeah. I don't know. I can say some experiences I've had with friends and just people I've met, that's definitely the case, that they're like, well, we decided as a couple not to have kids, so we got XYZ pet. Or some people couldn't have kids or whatever. And it's like, well, did you not want kids or did you want pet? I don't know. It's interesting. But yeah, I think our generation does shy away from parenting because I don't know, it's hard.
It's hard.
We all took the, you know, home ec classes where you had to take the baby home and it's crying all the time, and people trying to prepare you for adulthood. But
as someone who went through that course, I think they didn't do it well enough. That baby should have been crying 24/7.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah, for sure. Like,
I actually felt like that was that kind of helped me consider delaying parenthood as an adult for a while. I thought that actually was, but it's, as you mentioned before, was that that was probably more like a negative aspect of something. It was more like, oh, well, I equate parenting to all the bad stuff, which, yeah, sometimes it's bad, but there are good things too.
Yeah, because you're getting all the bad stuff from a baby doll that's requiring a grade for your, you know, progression through school, rather than, you know, having an actual infant that, you know, you grow up with and they learn and grow.
Yeah, and you can watch their, as I mentioned, you can watch their progress and, you know,
Yeah.
kind of.
Yeah, so it's, like you said, all negative and none of the positive feedback stuff. Unless you get an A in the class, then I guess you probably get a little euphoria from that, maybe. But it's probably excellent training for, you know, someone that's already decided they want to have kids, because it was fairly realistic and, you know, wake you up in the middle of the night to take care of a kid and things like that.
Definitely. Yeah, the lack of sleep aspect of new parents is something that everyone talks about, and I don't think you fully grasp until it actually occurs.
Or, yeah, until you're on the other side of it, even. Just,
yeah.
like, doing grad school while having a newborn was not the best decision, but did it with 2 newborns.
That's right.
worked out okay, I guess. I ended up only making 1 B, so
I'd say that worked out very well, at least for your grades. So.
Yeah. So learned quite a few things along the way, and feel like I can be more cyber friendly and cyber conscious, I guess, on the internet.
Good. Which is where we are already heading and have made it, if you will. I think a majority of people's communication is, you know, online now. I actually have a fully remote job, so I don't speak to in person any of my coworkers. So on the daily, I speak, you know, through the internet, if you will, to most everybody.
Wow, that's tough. No wonder you need to come talk on a podcast.
to do the same thing, to talk to masses of people that I don't get to see.
Yeah, well, at least we're talking to each other.
Very true.
But I couldn't imagine that. I don't think I would be, sadly, the manager that is some of the other ones these days that are trying to return people to office just because of my own, you know, desire to see people and talk to them and interface and things like that. But I do know I have within me that if I have a performer that does better at work at home, then I would allow it to happen. It's just my inherent desire to be around people would be like, nah, you guys gotta at least once a week come and like
I want to
Make
see
sure.
you.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's an interesting dynamic because very rarely have I met people who are like middle ground or uncommitted to one or the other. I feel like both me and you just admitted that we have our
Preference.
preference. That's the word. Thank you. Is that I don't have to physically speak to someone to know that work's getting done. We're communicating on a good level. But there are other people who are like, I can't do it. Like I have to physically see somebody and have them sitting next to me to know that we're working compatibly.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think probably the nature of my work plays into that a little bit because software sometimes people can write code, but like if I don't get the right thing and the times we have had to be a little more virtual than not, it's like I gotta somehow get them to pick up a phone and they can ignore me or they can be gone or they can be away or all sorts of reasons why they won't pick up a phone. But if I go to their desk, I can be like, hey, let's talk about this. And they can't be like, no, I'm gonna hang up the phone right now and I gotta go to this other meeting that's on Teams or whatever.
That's funny you mentioned that because you were talking, in my opinion, more of like a technical aspect. Like I want to be able to converse in person about a technical issue or something, while my company, who's been trying to initiate a return to an office setting, has been pushing the camaraderie narrative of,
Yeah.
oh, we have a community, a family of our employees, but we can't be a family if we're not together. So they don't even touch the technical aspect. And in my opinion, I think it's because they know that productivity of the technical side actually increased during work from
Yeah.
home.
Yeah. I mean, that makes sense. I mean, you're talking to the side of like retention and things in a company. So if they're just a remote worker that doesn't know anybody from Jim and Paul, the difference between the two, or whoever the CEO is, because they're only at home, they're going to see an offer from another place for 20% bump or whatever and go there because they'll still work from home. So you're not changing much. So they're trying to, at least my vision is they're trying to establish a corporate culture that they can then keep and retain people rather than just working for whoever you want from home, right?
Yeah, I think the culture is the word that you said. But in my opinion, a job is not necessarily a family, it's a paycheck. So I don't see how culture could be a deciding factor. If someone's offering me 20% more at company B, yeah, I'm going to company B.
Yeah. Yeah, the culture, I think the culture helps depending on what type of interface job you have, right? If you have bad bosses because they're grumpy all the time because somebody's on their ass about, spreadsheets or something, then that's not a helpful culture. And you want to get out of that toxic work environment and everything.
That's true.
But,
To the
like,
point that some people would be willing to take pay cuts if they can escape, like, a bad manager.
yeah,
Yeah.
as far as like family, probably one of the companies I worked with did it the best as far as that goes, where it was like, I want to stay here because these guys are cool and like we have poker nights and we gamble together and they
Nice.
gave me like their Tunica card so I could go get some benefits in Tunica while I was there and stuff, and they'd work on the weekends with me if there was a crunch time and things like that. But
Okay.
like those cultures, things that you can find where everybody's got their back, and if you make a mistake, you're not fired on the spot that day, sort of thing. Those are the cultural things I like. Um,
You
avoid,
said a company you worked for, so speaking of, if we're just catching up on things, you talked about getting to watch the kids grow up, getting through grad school, but how is your work coming along this past few months?
good, good. That's always an area I can't talk too much about, but
It's going
so
good, guys.
it's going good. It's chaos right now. Things are A lot of things are in play. A lot of deadlines have hit, so it's probably good that I'm out of school now because we're probably gonna have to go into some overtime hours and things like that. So couldn't be more thankful that my wife's stay at home because it gives me a chance to succeed and grow as a person in my career, at least for a
Shout
few
out to all
years.
the spouses out there who are there to support their significant others.
Yes, they are really the backbones and champions of a family. A few months ago it was both of us trying to carry our weight and just keep our head above water and trade off kids and duties and things like that. And now she's taking the bull by the horns and shouldering that burden. And when I get home from long hours now, I'm trying to still do the things I used to do, but not succeeding all the time. So she's picking up the slack and helping me there for sure.
No, that's good. I like to hear that. So many times, and I know we call this podcast Dads Discuss, but you can never overlook how integrated a good relationship is. Like, it's never 100% one person and 0% the other. Like, you always have to have that trade-off, that balance, and that connection.
Yeah, it's always got to be 100% from both people.
Oh, that too, yeah.
Well, except the times where you need a minute or a weekend or whatever. We both have the grace to admit that one of us we need to have individual time. But we're probably a unique we're probably a unique couple in the fact that we recognize all the advice from older generations before us that have said, capitalize on the kids while they're young, in that the time flies, right, and you want those memories and time with them and stuff. So we have the philosophy of why get a babysitter or why go on a girls' weekend while our kids are young and we're missing experiences. So we do everything with our kids until they start abandoning us for their friends.
Okay. So no like, monthly scheduled date nights or anything?
Not really. The kids are our dates, basically.
Oh, okay. All right.
So we will, anniversaries and a few other things we'll still do individual, and car rides, long car rides, road trips, things like that. The kids are in the back doing their own thing, and we talk and catch up and have our bonding moments here and there. But otherwise, it's all about the kids, because 10 years from now, who knows what they're going to be doing, right?
That's interesting. No, I would say that, we are around our kids a lot. We love them, but, me and Kimber still try and have occasional date nights where it's just us. Last night was actually one of those. So that was nice. At least in my opinion, it was nice to be able to get out of the house for a little bit without having the kids, have some time, just being adults together. So.
Yeah, I think that's important. 1 second.
Oh, we're leaving this in the podcast, guys. Steven's plugging in his laptop because the battery was about to die.
Saved it. Saved it. Yeah, I think a few times we've done the individual date night sort of thing where we're still kind of a group activity of the family, including extended family, goes and does something and the kids run off with them and we just kind of hang out together sort of thing. Or we went on a cruise last year and it was with the in-laws, so the kids hung out with the in-laws for a bit and we got a few hours each night together, things like that.
Good. I do think that can be important, and I'm glad you mentioned about the vacations. Was like I said, I'm going to write that on the board. But we are under the philosophy, at least me and my wife, that we want to have meaningful interactions with the children, not just come home, talk about their school. Hey, we got to do your homework. Go brush your teeth. Not just that aspect, but have meaningful interaction with them day to day. But also trips outside of like the home. So rather than, I think it was more common in the past. During the summer, you might set aside a week or 2 weeks and the whole family would go on vacation for that whole time. We don't like to do that. We like to have what I call weekend getaways. Mm-hmm. So say we have a long weekend, go book 2 nights in a hotel or an Airbnb, in a city that's drivable. Go take the whole family, spend 2 or 3 days in a place and then come back. And I actually really enjoy that. I think it's a good break. It's a good time for everyone, all the kids and all the parents to be together. You're doing activities together and it's kind of just a break from the monotony of day-to-day life.
Yeah, that's a great idea. And you get to explore a new place usually, or some place you found really fascinating, exactly. Sort of thing.
Oh, yeah.
That's why I want to get into maybe in a few years when all the kids are able, but, more camping and things like that, because you can do that to keep it cheaper. And
this is true.
Go to, Depends on if mom's coming with us or not, but cheaper if you're willing to sleep in a tent, right? She's like, you can give me a lodge, and then I'm like, well, then the budget's blown for the camping trip.
No, I would definitely be of the glamping mindset. I can't sleep in a tent. I need some running water, please.
You can't show up to a Boy Scout camp and find that the campsite they gave you is all gravel, and you gotta set up your
Oh no!
tent on gravel, and you only have a little thin pad to keep you comfortable.
Sounds like I'm sleeping in the car. We're lucky, at least in the location where we live, is I feel like there is a tremendous amount of places that are even just an hour or two away to go. So making little weekend trips like that, whether it be large cities or, remote camping areas, I feel like we're quite lucky. I can't imagine what it's like living in the Midwest. Yeah, and I was thinking more like living in Kansas, where you drive 100 miles in every direction and you're still just in the cornfield.
Yeah,
like where do you go?
Yeah, that would be brutal. Yeah, that's another thing we brought up on this podcast is where do you live for your children, right? That would be the sense of adventure as far as it goes. I guess you can make up a lot of stuff, and then that's where all the UFOs land, right?
Oh,
So
I'm sure, yeah.
Yeah, at least have a little bit of fun with that. No, but I've been to Kodiak, Alaska before, and it's awesome as far as like nature and hiking and things like that and stuff that's out to kill you and whatnot. But climbing to the top of one of their mountains, you can see like forever, like no civilization, and that's just very mind-boggling.
That is
really cool.
Yeah, that's a little surreal to me.
Yeah,
especially when I fly occasionally through my job and also personally, but when you get to stretches of country where there is no civilization, and it is mind-boggling. I remember flying over a mountain range one time, and I'm used to seeing cities, neighborhoods, plots of farmland, and then it's just nothing but trees and rocks and like no signs of even any roads. And I'm just like, wow, that's fascinating.
It's cool.
Yep.
For sure. Because when you live in more urban areas, even some rural areas now, you're like, well, there's people everywhere, right? Like,
yes.
Especially with that narrative we talked about, overpopulation and whatnot. You're like, yeah, there's people everywhere. There's no room. And then you actually go to these places, and you're like, there's like the world's massive.
Yeah, the world is, but where people live may not be. I tend to think of places like Japan, an island nation that has the largest city in the world at the moment. It's just sprawling metropolis, but there are places in the world where the population would be, relatively 0 humans per square mile, and that's crazy.
Yeah. Geography.
Hey, I like geography.
And then you look, and then you zoom out even one step further, and you're like, "Hey, we're only one planet." In this
we are nothing.
Universe.
Insignificant speck.
Yeah.
That's been interesting. As I guess I didn't realize, or I had forgotten how much education is taught at the preschool level. That it's not a daycare, and getting to see Luna come home every day from that and tell me about what she's learned, like the names of all the planets and just different topics. It's been really fun to me to like see that.
Oh man, when I something the 4-year-olds latch on to the death subject that they just ask about all the time. That's always a tough one.
I feel like we may have covered this.
Yeah. Did we? Well, we covered the topic of death, but just talking about what they've learned in school and stuff. Like around Easter time, they were talking about Jesus dying and resurrecting and stuff, and it's like that always latches on to the brain. But I guess even as adults, we are fascinated by it because it's the mystery of the unknown.
The unknown, exactly. Yeah. That's funny. I don't think that our youngest, I also feel like she's very level-headed, may not be the right word, but very realistic. And so the concept of death has come up just due to friends, relatives, and pets passing on. But she hasn't been very affected by it. At one time she was, as she kind of, like you could see her little brain working, and then the realization of, oh, I'm never going to see this person again. And she got sad. But then the next day she's just like, so-and-so, oh yeah, they're dead. like
Yeah.
just like it's a stated fact.
Unfiltered, yeah.
Yeah.
And they're pretty brutal about it.
Yep.
'Cause, I told them about my brother, and the oldest was like, "Yeah, your brother's dead, Dad."
Yeah.
I'm like, I know.
No, thanks.
I'm sad. Thanks. Yeah. But
The honesty of children is very something that a lot of people do talk about, and it's funny to see firsthand.
yeah. Yeah. They can roast you because they know all your weakest points, right?
She came home the other day, and I guess she was told to draw her parents. So if any of you have kids and have made it to that stage, you know what I'm about to say. But getting to see a drawing of yourself from your child's perspective, that was eye-opening. I got this huge head and then 2 little tufts of hair, but none on the top of my head. And she was like, "Look, I have your hair on the sides, but not on the top like you." Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Of course, if any of you have
Appreciate
ever
it.
seen The Amazing World of Gumball, that's what it looked like, because she drew my arms coming out where my ears should be. So.
You're just a floating head
I
with 2
was.
arms.
And 2 little patches of hair.
Patches of hair. No ears. Right?
Nope.
That's pretty good. Yeah, the brutal honesty of children, that's for sure. Out of the mouth of babes, as they say.
Exactly.
Well, heck, man, we've caught up a little bit. Anything else we missed out on the past few months that's been happening? I mean, there's probably about 30 other things, but
Oh,
we've
there
been
is.
going about an hour now, so we don't want to hold everybody up
No,
too
of
much.
course not. No, we'll definitely get into all the nitty gritties of politics, current events, and everything. But we appreciate you guys keeping with us through this hiatus, and we'll get back on a regularly scheduled release program so you can follow along in our journey of fatherhood.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. There's the only other thing I would cover is I have digested several books this year, so we'll probably bring those up every once in a while. So
Please do.
I've been making Facebook posts about them, so it's always fun. All right, thanks for joining us, and we'll see you guys next time.
Thank you.
Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. Except we already have that in our outro. Thanks for listening to Dad's Discuss.
Please like and subscribe wherever you are listening.
Also, comment any topics you would like us to discuss and share this with your friends and family.
Finally, if you would like to be on the podcast or discuss any topics, please reach out via our contact information below.